In number 10, you're asked to find both the perimeter and the area of this rectangle when you're given a binomial and a monomial for the side lengths. So perimeter is probably the easiest. You just got to remember that you're adding up all four sides. So I'm going to label my other two sides so that I don't forget about them, because the common mistake is that some kids will just add up two of the sides. So I'm going to have 5x minus 2 plus 5x minus 2 plus 4x plus another 4x. And then I'm going to combine my like terms. So 5x, another 5x is 10x, plus 4x gives me 18x. And that would be minus 4. The symbol right here should be a minus 2. All right, there's my perimeter, and that would just be units, not square units. Since it doesn't specify if it's centimeters or feet, I'm going to write that generic word. Now, area is equal to length times width of a rectangle. So I need to multiply my two sides together. So 4x times 5x minus 2. So I'm just going to need to distribute. And take this 4x times both of these, gives me 20x to the second power minus 8x. And this time it would be units to the second power, units squared for your area. In number 11, now we're going to start factoring. So we're reminded to factor out the GCF, and that's always your first factoring step. So 2 goes into both 2 and 8, and then there's a shared x to the third power in both places. So I need to divide each term by 2x to the third. If I start with a binomial, I need to have a binomial inside. So keep my base, subtract my exponents is x to the first minus 4. Here is my answer. 12 is a trinomial. I first look for a GCF, and only one can factor out. So I'm going to go to my tic-tac-toe method. Across the top of the board, put your first, then your last term, and the middle term is your checking term. J times j is the only way I'm going to get j squared. The fact that it's positive 25 tells me that the signs are the same. My factors of 25 are 1 and 25 or 5 and 5. I always start with my two closest together. I multiply across this way and I get 5j and 5j. The only place I add is to check it. It does add to 10j, so my factors are on my diagonal. This would be j plus 5 times j plus 5. Better read as the quantity of j plus 5 times the quantity of j plus 5. 13, again, there's no GCF greater than 1, so I set up my tic-tac-toe board. This time, I'm missing my middle term, so I'm going to put a 0 there. V times V is V squared. Because my sign is a negative, I'm going to get that by a positive times a negative, and I'm going to do 6 times 6. So multiplying across this way gives me 6V and negative 6V adds to 0. My one factor is V plus 6, my other is V minus 6. Again in 14, no GCF greater than 1, so setting up my tic-tac-toe board, factors of c squared are c and c. Factors of negative 35 means one's positive and one's negative. So I'm going to have 1 times 35 and 5 times 7. I'm going to start with 5 and 7. I'm going to put 7 here and 5 here. So I multiply across, I get 7c and negative 5c. That adds to positive 2c, so that's incorrect. So what that means is I need to change this one to the positive and this to negative 7. Now it's going to add to negative 2c, so my factor is c minus 7 times the quantity of c plus 5. Remember, you can always double distribute to make sure that your factored answer is the same as the starting simplified answer. 15, here I have that leading coefficient that's negative. I hate when that's like that, and you should too. So you're going to factor out a negative GCF to start. When I look at 8 and 8, 8 goes into both of those, and then there's a shared a. So I'm going to divide each of these by negative 8a, which gives me positive a to the second minus 1. because a positive divided by a negative is a negative, and then anything divided by itself is 1. Now, for this remaining binomial, it's to the second power, so I'm going to try to factor that with tic-tac-toe. It's missing the middle term. A times A is A squared. Positive 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, so I multiply across this way. I get 1A and negative A adds to 0. So my final answer is negative 8A times A plus 1 times A minus 1. Make sure you don't drop the GCF. Here's 16. Looking for a GCF, it looks like I can factor 2 out of everything. There's not an A squared in all 3, so I'm just going to divide by 2. Gives me A to the second minus 11A plus 24. For the remaining trinomial, I'm going to set up my tic-tac-toe board. Factors of A squared are A times A. The fact that this has a positive 24, we're going to do a negative times a negative because the signs have to be the same and then they're both negative. So factors of 24 are 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. I'm going to start with 4 and 6 because they're closest together, and I multiply this way, gives me negative 4A and negative 6A. That adds to negative 10A. Not going to work, so I cross out this 4 and 6, and I'm going to erase and try again. So let's try 3 and 8 now. So 3 and 8 multiplying across gives me negative 3A and negative 8A. And that does add to negative 11A. So my one factor is A minus 8, and my other is the quantity of A minus 3. Make sure you bring down the GCF to get a final answer of this. And finally, in 17, if the area of a rectangle is p squared minus 14p plus 33, determine the length and width. So we have the area. Well, if we know that area is length times width, we need to find the two things that multiply together to give us this trinomial. So in other words, we need to factor. It's just a fancy way of applying a factoring problem. So set up your board. P times P is the easy part. Factors of positive 33 would have to be a negative times a negative to get that middle term of a negative. So factors of 33 are let's see, 1 times 33, 3 times 11. Let's go with 3 and 11 to start. So multiplying across gives me negative 3p and negative 11p. Looks like we got it first try. So my factors are p minus 3 times the quantity of p minus 11. So which one's length, which one's width? Doesn't matter. Because if I just flip the rectangle, one, you could call the length the width and vice versa. Okay, if you can handle all the problems on this study guide, you are in pretty good shape for your test.